A forbidden affair behind bars leads to a deadly cover-up. What happens when trust is shattered in the most dangerous place? Jennifer Lewis stood at the gates of the maximum security prison, her eyes scanning the imposing structure before her. The tall, gray walls stretched into the sky, reflecting the cold, industrial atmosphere of the place. Today was her first day as a corrections officer at the Birmingham Women's Correctional Facility. She had worked at a lower security facility before, but this was different. This place was known for housing some of the most dangerous and volatile inmates in the state of Alabama, and Jennifer knew she was stepping into uncharted territory. As she walked through the gates, the weight of the responsibility hit her. She wasn't just another officer. She was part of a system that kept these women locked away from the world. The prison's reputation preceded it, a place where every decision had consequences, where the lines between right and wrong were often blurred by the harsh realities of the system. The air inside the prison was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lights. The hallways were long and narrow, with metal doors lining either side. Each door was a barrier between the officers and the women who lived behind them, a constant reminder of the distance between the guards and the inmates. "Follow me," said Officer Greg Houston, the shift supervisor. He was a seasoned officer with years of experience, and he led Jennifer through the maze-like corridors. His voice was clipped, and his instructions were to the point. "This is the maximum security unit," Greg said, pointing to a row of heavy doors. "We house some of the most dangerous women in the state here. Keep your eyes open and always be aware of your surroundings." Jennifer nodded, her gaze flicking to the inmates who stood behind the bars, their eyes following her every move. Some of the women looked disinterested, while others studied her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. She was the new face in a place that ran on routine, and she knew she had to prove herself. Her thoughts were interrupted as they passed a woman who caught her attention. The inmate stood apart from the others, her posture straight, her eyes calm but piercing. Jennifer couldn't help but notice her. There was something about the way she held herself that set her apart from the others. "Her name is Lisa Turner," Greg said, noticing Jennifer's gaze. "She's been here for a while. Don't let her demeanor fool you. She's dangerous." Jennifer nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lisa than met the eye. The rest of the tour passed in a blur. More instructions, more rules, and more of the cold, sterile environment that defined life in the prison. When her shift finally ended, Jennifer was exhausted, her mind racing with the details of the day. As she left the facility, she couldn't stop thinking about Lisa, about the way she had stood out in the crowd, about the quiet confidence she exuded. There was something magnetic about her, and Jennifer couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath the surface. Over the next few days, Jennifer settled into her new role. The routines were strict, the rules were clear, and her interactions with the inmates were professional. At least, they were supposed to be. But as much as she tried to focus on the job, her thoughts kept drifting back to Lisa Turner. There was something about her that couldn't be ignored, something that gnawed at Jennifer's curiosity. Every time their paths crossed, Lisa's gaze was calm, almost too calm for someone imprisoned for such a violent crime. Jennifer did her best to maintain a professional distance, focusing on the job at hand. Yet, despite her best efforts, their interactions became more frequent. At first, it was nothing more than casual exchanges, brief greetings in the hallways, or quick conversations during the inmates' recreation time. Lisa would often give Jennifer a slight smile, one that was hard to decipher, but it made Jennifer feel both uneasy and intrigued. On the 5th day of her shift, Jennifer found herself in the prison library, performing her rounds. The library was one of the few places in the facility where the inmates had a bit of freedom. It was quiet, almost peaceful, and Jennifer liked to spend time there, making sure everything was running smoothly. As she walked past the rows of bookshelves, she spotted Lisa sitting in the back corner, her eyes focused on a book. There was a strange serenity about her, like she had mastered the art of living in the moment. Lisa glanced up as Jennifer approached, offering a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You're here a lot," Jennifer remarked, trying to sound casual. Lisa looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing her words carefully. "I find peace in books," she said softly. "Sometimes it's the only escape I get." Jennifer nodded, surprised by the depth in Lisa's voice. Most of the women she had encountered so far seemed hardened by their circumstances, but Lisa's demeanor was different. It was as if she didn't belong in this place, as though she carried a secret that was hidden deep within her. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Jennifer asked, despite herself. Lisa hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but thank you for asking." The brief exchange left Jennifer with a strange feeling. She had been in enough prisons to know that inmates didn't always open up, especially not to guards. But Lisa had, in her own quiet way, let Jennifer in. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection that Jennifer couldn't quite explain. The days passed, and Jennifer found herself drawn to Lisa more and more. She told herself it was just professional curiosity, but deep down, she knew it was something more. There was a magnetic pull between them, something that neither of them could ignore. One evening, after the facility had settled into the quiet rhythm of the night shift, Jennifer found herself walking past Lisa's cell again. She had just finished her rounds and was heading back to the staff room when she saw Lisa standing near the bars of her cell, looking out into the hallway. Their eyes met, and for a moment Jennifer felt as if Lisa were reading her thoughts. "I can tell you have questions," Lisa said, her voice low but steady. Jennifer stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" Lisa's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to the bars. "You've been watching me," she said, her tone neither accusatory nor defensive, but knowing. "I can see it in your eyes. You want to know why I'm here? You want to know why I'm different from the others?" Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized she had been so obvious. "You don't have to say anything," Lisa interrupted, her smile faint but genuine. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm not like the rest of the women here. I'm not like them, but I'm here just the same." The statement hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jennifer didn't know what to say. She had never encountered an inmate who was so open about their situation, so willing to share their truth. It was both unsettling and captivating. "Why are you telling me this?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's smile widened just a fraction. "Because you're not like the others either. I can see it in you." With that, Lisa turned away, disappearing into the shadows of her cell. Jennifer stood frozen in place, her mind racing. What had just happened? Why had Lisa opened up to her like that? And why did it feel like there was so much more to the story? As the days passed, Jennifer found herself more entangled in Lisa's world. The tension between them grew, subtle at first, but undeniable. Every glance they exchanged, every word spoken, seemed to carry a weight that neither could ignore. Despite her best efforts to maintain a professional distance, Jennifer found herself drifting closer to Lisa. It wasn't just the quiet moments they shared during her rounds or the brief exchanges in the library. No, it was something deeper. Lisa's vulnerability had drawn Jennifer in, and now Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about her. What had happened in Lisa's life to make her so different from the others? Why did Jennifer feel this inexplicable need to understand her? One night, as Jennifer was finishing her shift, she found herself walking past Lisa's cell once again. This time, Lisa was sitting on her bunk, looking out through the bars, lost in thought. As Jennifer approached, their eyes met, and a wave of tension rippled through the air. Lisa didn't speak immediately, but Jennifer could feel the weight of her gaze, as if Lisa were waiting for Jennifer to say something. Anything. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "You've been on my mind a lot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's eyes softened, and she stood up slowly, walking closer to the bars. "I've been thinking about you, too," she admitted, her voice steady but full of an emotion Jennifer couldn't quite place. "I'm not used to someone like you paying attention to me." Jennifer felt a pang of guilt. She had tried so hard to keep her distance, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. She had to remind herself that Lisa was an inmate, someone who was serving time for a violent crime. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get involved. "I'm just doing my job," Jennifer replied, her tone slightly defensive. "It's not personal." But Lisa wasn't convinced. "I can see through you, Jennifer," she said softly. "You're not like the others. You care, even if you don't want to admit it." The words hit Jennifer like a punch to the gut. She had been trying so hard to maintain that professional detachment, but Lisa had seen right through it. It was unsettling to realize how much of herself she had been hiding, even from herself. "I don't know what you want from me," Jennifer admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Lisa's smile was slow, almost imperceptible. "I don't want anything from you, Jennifer. Not yet, anyway." There was something dangerous in her words, a promise of more that Jennifer couldn't quite grasp. But the allure was undeniable. She knew she was walking a fine line, and yet every time Lisa looked at her, every time their eyes met, she couldn't pull away. The next few days were filled with more of the same. Lisa's presence lingered in Jennifer's mind long after their interactions ended. She tried to keep her focus on the job, but it was impossible. There was a constant pull between them, like a magnetic force drawing them together despite their better judgment. One afternoon, during a routine inspection, Jennifer found herself standing in front of Lisa's cell again. This time, Lisa was sitting on the edge of her bunk, writing something in a notebook. When she looked up and saw Jennifer, she put the notebook down and stood slowly. "I think about you, you know," Lisa said, her voice low but clear. Jennifer felt her heart race in her chest. "What do you mean?" "I think about what it would be like if things were different," Lisa replied, her gaze steady. "If I wasn't here, if you weren't a guard. Do you ever think about that?" The question hung in the air, charged with tension. Jennifer swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. The idea of a life outside these prison walls, a life where she wasn't restricted by rules and boundaries, was a fantasy she hadn't allowed herself to entertain. But now, with Lisa's words lingering in her mind, that fantasy seemed more real than ever. "Sometimes," Jennifer confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't think about it. Not with you." Lisa smiled, a small, knowing smile that sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. "Why not?" "We both know there's something between us, something more than just the guard-inmate dynamic. You feel it too." Jennifer felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. Lisa's words, her gaze, they were breaking through the carefully constructed boundaries she had placed between them. But Jennifer didn't know what to do with those feelings. She had always been in control of her emotions, but with Lisa, it was different. "I don't know what this is," Jennifer admitted, her voice shaky. "But I can't just ignore it." Lisa stepped closer to the bars, her eyes never leaving Jennifer's. "You don't have to ignore it," she said softly, "but you do have to make a choice." The words struck Jennifer like a jolt of electricity. A choice! What choice was she supposed to make? She had always prided herself on being in control, on doing what was right. But now, with Lisa standing before her, that control was slipping away. "I can't be part of your escape," Jennifer said suddenly, her voice firm, even though she could feel the hesitation in her words. "I'm a guard, Lisa. That's what I do. I can't break the rules." Lisa's expression darkened slightly, but she didn't back away. "You don't have to help me escape," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "But I know you're torn, Jennifer. I see it. You're not just doing your job anymore, are you?" Lisa's expression softened, and she stepped back, giving Jennifer space. "You don't have to make a decision now," she said. "But you will, eventually. And when you do, just remember that I'm here." With that, Lisa turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Jennifer stood there for a long time, her mind racing, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? What was she supposed to do now? The next few days felt like a blur. Jennifer's thoughts consumed by Lisa and the impossible choice she faced. She tried to focus on her work, to bury her emotions beneath the surface, but it was no use. Every time she passed Lisa's cell, every time their eyes met, the tension between them was undeniable. It wasn't long before Lisa approached her again, this time in the cafeteria. Jennifer had just finished her lunch and was heading back to the staff area when Lisa appeared out of nowhere, standing by the door. "I need to talk to you," Lisa said quietly, her voice urgent. Jennifer hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. "Not here," she whispered, motioning for Lisa to follow her to a quieter part of the prison. They found an empty hallway, and Jennifer turned to face Lisa. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Lisa's eyes locked onto Jennifer's, her expression intense. "I don't want to wait anymore," she said, her voice low. "I want to be with you. I want to get out of here, and I want you to be the one who helps me. But only if you want it too." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding, the moment she would have to choose between the life she had known and the life that was being offered to her, a life with Lisa. For a long moment, Jennifer didn't say anything. She just stood there, her mind racing. She had always thought she knew what she wanted, what was right. But now, faced with Lisa's plea, she didn't know what to do. "I don't know if I can do this," Jennifer said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can break the rules." Lisa stepped closer, her voice soft and understanding. "You don't have to break the rules, Jennifer. You just have to decide if you're willing to bend them for once. For us." Jennifer couldn't remember the last time she'd been so conflicted. Every moment felt like a tug of war between her duty and her emotions. The walls she had built around herself, the boundaries she had so carefully maintained for years, were crumbling with every conversation, every glance from Lisa. Her shift that night felt longer than usual, the ticking clock seeming to drag her to a moment she wasn't ready for. She had been avoiding Lisa as best as she could, keeping her interactions brief and impersonal. But no matter how much she tried to suppress it, the temptation to cross that line was always there. Lisa was always there, waiting, silently calling to her, reminding her of what could be. Jennifer had spent the entire evening going over the pros and cons in her head. On the one hand, she knew that getting involved with Lisa was risky, that it could end badly for both of them. Lisa was an inmate. Her life was a tangled mess of complications, of secrets and dangers Jennifer couldn't even begin to understand. And yet, Lisa was different from anyone Jennifer had ever met. She was sharp, unapologetically honest, and, most of all, she saw through Jennifer's carefully crafted exterior. On the other hand, Jennifer couldn't ignore the way Lisa made her feel. The electricity between them was undeniable, and every time their eyes met, it was as if the world around them ceased to exist. It was as if everything that was real and important in her life was being replaced with the possibility of something new, something dangerous, something exhilarating. But Jennifer knew better. She knew that life wasn't a fairy tale. She had a job, a career, a future that was supposed to be safe, secure. Getting involved with Lisa would destroy all of that. It could ruin her life. It could ruin Lisa's life. The repercussions could be catastrophic. And deep down, Jennifer knew that. That night, as Jennifer walked the empty halls of the prison, her thoughts weighed heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the tension in the air, the palpable sense of indecision that had been building inside her for days. And then, as if fate had conspired to push her forward, she saw Lisa. Lisa was standing near the window in the hallway, looking out at the darkened world beyond the prison walls. The glow from the moon illuminated her figure, casting long shadows across her face. She didn't hear Jennifer approach, but she must have felt her presence because she turned around when Jennifer was just a few steps away. "You came," Lisa said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to," Jennifer replied, her words soft but resolute. Lisa's expression softened, and she stepped back, giving Jennifer space. "You don't have to make a decision now," she said, "but you will, eventually. And when you do, just remember that I'm here." With that, Lisa turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Jennifer stood there for a long time, her mind racing, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? What was she supposed to do now? The next few days felt like a blur. Jennifer's thoughts consumed by Lisa and the impossible choice she faced. She tried to focus on her work, to bury her emotions beneath the surface, but it was no use. Every time she passed Lisa's cell, every time their eyes met, the tension between them was undeniable. It wasn't long before Lisa approached her again, this time in the cafeteria. Jennifer had just finished her lunch and was heading back to the staff area when Lisa appeared out of nowhere, standing by the door. "I need to talk to you," Lisa said quietly, her voice urgent. Jennifer hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. "Not here," she whispered, motioning for Lisa to follow her to a quieter part of the prison. They found an empty hallway, and Jennifer turned to face Lisa. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Lisa's eyes locked onto Jennifer's, her expression intense. "I don't want to wait anymore," she said, her voice low. "I want to be with you. I want to get out of here, and I want you to be the one who helps me. But only if you want it too." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding, the moment she would have to choose between the life she had known and the life that was being offered to her, a life with Lisa. For a long moment, Jennifer didn't say anything. She just stood there, her mind racing. She had always thought she knew what she wanted, what was right. But now, faced with Lisa's plea, she didn't know what to do. "I don't know if I can do this," Jennifer said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can break the rules." Lisa stepped closer, her voice soft and understanding. "You don't have to break the rules, Jennifer. You just have to decide if you're willing to bend them for once. For us." Jennifer couldn't remember the last time she'd been so conflicted. Every moment felt like a tug of war between her duty and her emotions. The walls she had built around herself, the boundaries she had so carefully maintained for years, were crumbling with every conversation, every glance from Lisa. Her shift that night felt longer than usual, the ticking clock seeming to drag her to a moment she wasn't ready for. She had been avoiding Lisa as best as she could, keeping her interactions brief and impersonal. But no matter how much she tried to suppress it, the temptation to cross that line was always there. Lisa was always there, waiting, silently calling to her, reminding her of what could be. Jennifer had spent the entire evening going over the pros and cons in her head. On the one hand, she knew that getting involved with Lisa was risky, that it could end badly for both of them. Lisa was an inmate. Her life was a tangled mess of complications, of secrets and dangers Jennifer couldn't even begin to understand. And yet, Lisa was different from anyone Jennifer had ever met. She was sharp, unapologetically honest, and, most of all, she saw through Jennifer's carefully crafted exterior. On the other hand, Jennifer couldn't ignore the way Lisa made her feel. The electricity between them was undeniable, and every time their eyes met, it was as if the world around them ceased to exist. It was as if everything that was real and important in her life was being replaced with the possibility of something new, something dangerous, something exhilarating. But Jennifer knew better. She knew that life wasn't a fairy tale. She had a job, a career, a future that was supposed to be safe, secure. Getting involved with Lisa would destroy all of that. It could ruin her life. It could ruin Lisa's life. The repercussions could be catastrophic. And deep down, Jennifer knew that. That night, as Jennifer walked the empty halls of the prison, her thoughts weighed heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the tension in the air, the palpable sense of indecision that had been building inside her for days. And then, as if fate had conspired to push her forward, she saw Lisa. Lisa was standing near the window in the hallway, looking out at the darkened world beyond the prison walls. The glow from the moon illuminated her figure, casting long shadows across her face. She didn't hear Jennifer approach, but she must have felt her presence because she turned around when Jennifer was just a few steps away. "You came," Lisa said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to," Jennifer replied, her words soft but resolute. Lisa studied her for a moment, her eyes searching Jennifer's face. "You've made your choice, haven't you?" Jennifer swallowed hard, her heart racing in her chest. She had never been good at making decisions, at committing to something that might change her life forever. But now, there was no turning back. "I haven't made it yet," Jennifer said, her voice trembling, "but I'm close." Lisa's gaze softened, and she took a step toward Jennifer. "You don't have to rush it," she said, her tone soothing. "I just want you to know that I'm here, Jennifer, whenever you're ready." It was that simple, wasn't it? Lisa wasn't asking for anything more than Jennifer's trust. She wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding. She was simply offering a chance, an opportunity to take a risk, to step outside the boundaries that had defined Jennifer's life for so long. But as Jennifer stood there, her mind spinning, she couldn't ignore the reality of what Lisa was asking. The world they both lived in was dangerous. Crossing that line would change everything. It wasn't just about following her heart. It was about risking her future, her safety, everything she had worked for. "I don't know what to do," Jennifer whispered, more to herself than to Lisa. Lisa reached out, her fingers brushing Jennifer's hand. The contact sent a wave of warmth through Jennifer's body, and for a moment, all of her doubts and fears seemed to fade into the background. There was only Lisa, only the connection between them. "You'll know when it's the right time," Lisa said softly, her voice steady and reassuring. "But when you're ready, don't hesitate. Life's too short to wait for the perfect moment." For the first time, Jennifer felt a sense of clarity. She had been waiting for the perfect moment, for the ideal circumstances that would make it easier to make her decision. But Lisa was right. There was no perfect moment. There was only now, only the choice that lay before her. Jennifer took a deep breath and turned her gaze toward Lisa. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Lisa smiled then, a soft, knowing smile that seemed to say everything Jennifer needed to hear. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of understanding, of two people caught in a moment that was bigger than both of them. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest as she took another step forward, closing the distance between them. This was it, the moment when everything changed. But as Jennifer reached out to touch Lisa's arm, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Both women froze, their eyes widening in alarm. It was too late to back out now. Before Jennifer could react, a voice called out from the end of the corridor. "Hey, what's going on here?" The voice at the end of the hallway broke the moment like a sudden storm, and Jennifer's heart nearly stopped. She could feel Lisa tense beside her, her body instinctively pulling away. For a split second, everything was frozen. Time itself seemed to stand still. Jennifer turned slowly toward the source of the voice, her pulse racing as she tried to steady her breathing. "Hey!" the voice called again, sharper this time. It was Officer Daniels, a seasoned guard, known for his strict approach and no-nonsense attitude. He was walking toward them, his boots echoing loudly in the otherwise silent hall. Lisa didn't need to say a word. Her expression alone was enough to communicate the tension between them. Jennifer's first instinct was to pull back, to pretend as though nothing had happened, to maintain the distance she'd always kept. But that moment of clarity, the decision she had made just seconds before, gave her the courage to stand her ground. "Everything all right here?" Officer Daniels asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. His gaze flickered between Jennifer and Lisa, a subtle tension in the air that neither could hide. Jennifer cleared her throat and tried to compose herself. "Yes, just talking," she replied, forcing her voice to sound calm. Lisa, as usual, didn't bother to hide her emotions. She stood there, looking completely unperturbed, though there was an unreadable glint in her eyes. "Just talking," she echoed with a smirk, her tone dripping with irony. Officer Daniels paused for a moment, his suspicion growing as he looked between them. He had been a guard long enough to recognize when something wasn't quite right, but he didn't press the issue immediately. Instead, he gave a curt nod. "All right, keep it moving then." he muttered before turning and walking away, his boots receding down the hall. Both Jennifer and Lisa exhaled in relief, the tension slowly bleeding out of the space between them. But the moment they had shared was over, at least for now. Jennifer's heart was still pounding in her chest, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. Officer Daniels was no fool. He had seen something in their interaction, and the way he'd looked at them, the suspicion in his eyes, was enough to make her question whether they had just made a huge mistake. "You all right?" Lisa asked quietly, her voice laced with concern. Jennifer nodded slowly, still trying to catch her breath. "Yeah, but we have to be careful. That was close." Lisa didn't argue. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on Jennifer with a seriousness that matched the gravity of the moment. "We can't keep doing this if we're not careful. If anyone finds out—" "I know," Jennifer cut in, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But I'm not backing out now." The words hung in the air between them. There was no going back. Whatever had just started, it was bigger than both of them now. And with the risk came the promise of something they both desperately needed, something that went beyond the walls of the prison, beyond the roles they had to play every day. But Jennifer knew that the stakes were higher now. Officer Daniels had noticed something, and if he noticed, so could others. They couldn't afford to be careless. "I don't regret it," Jennifer whispered, more to herself than to Lisa. "But we have to be smarter. We can't let anyone catch on." Lisa gave a soft, knowing smile. "Don't worry. I've survived worse," she said, her tone playful, but with an edge of seriousness. Jennifer shook her head, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips despite the unease in her chest. "I'm not worried about you," she said quietly. "I'm worried about me." Lisa's expression softened, and she stepped closer, the gap between them closing once again. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time, okay?" Jennifer nodded, taking in a deep breath. "One step at a time," she repeated, as if the words were a mantra she needed to hear. The moment stretched on for a few seconds longer, but the sound of footsteps once again interrupted their fragile bubble. This time, it wasn't Officer Daniels. The footsteps were lighter, quicker, a fellow inmate, perhaps, or another guard coming to check on them. Without a word, Lisa stepped back, her posture shifting back into something more neutral, more guarded. Jennifer followed her lead, instinctively falling into her role as the cautious, no-nonsense officer. They both stood there, a picture of professionalism, as if nothing had just passed between them. The guard appeared around the corner, glancing at them briefly before continuing on his way. Nothing more than a passing glance. Nothing to suggest that anything had happened, that anything was wrong. But Jennifer felt the weight of the moment in her chest, a heavy knot that refused to loosen. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a fine line, a line that was bound to snap sooner or later. The days following their close call with Officer Daniels passed in a blur, each one more suffocating than the last. Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Every glance from a guard, every whisper from an inmate, sent a shiver down her spine. She found herself second-guessing every decision, every move, as if the walls of the prison were closing in around her. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed unaffected. She continued to move through the prison like she owned it, her confidence unshaken. But Jennifer saw the cracks, the small moments of hesitation, the way Lisa's eyes would flicker when they passed too close to a guard or a fellow inmate. Jennifer wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. One afternoon, Jennifer found herself standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching the sunlight filter through the bars of the prison yard. It was a rare moment of peace, a break from the chaos that had become their lives. She leaned against the wall, her thoughts consumed by everything that had happened in the past week. It was then that Lisa appeared, walking toward her with a purposeful stride. Her expression was unreadable, but Jennifer could sense the tension in the air between them. Lisa stopped a few feet away, her gaze locked on Jennifer. "We need to talk," Lisa said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that sent a jolt through Jennifer's chest. Jennifer nodded, her stomach tightening with unease. She motioned toward the small bench nearby, and they both sat down, the distance between them uncomfortable. "What's going on?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's eyes flickered nervously for the first time since they'd started this secret. She ran a hand through her hair, her fingers trembling slightly. "I've been thinking about everything. The risks, the consequences. I don't know if I can keep doing this." Jennifer felt her heart skip a beat. "What are you saying?" Lisa's gaze shifted away for a moment, and Jennifer could see the hesitation in her eyes. "I'm saying that maybe we need to back off for a while. Maybe we've pushed it too far." Jennifer's chest tightened, panic surging through her. She couldn't lose this, not now. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We can't stop. We can't let fear control us." Lisa looked at her, her expression softening. "I'm not scared, Jennifer, but I'm not stupid either. This is dangerous. We're risking everything, and for what? A few moments of whatever this is?" Jennifer's pulse raced as she tried to form a response. She had never thought of it that way, never allowed herself to consider the consequences of their actions. She had been so consumed with the pull between them, the growing desire, that she hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. But now, in the quiet of the courtyard, with the sunlight fading into the shadows, Jennifer could feel the weight of those consequences pressing down on her. What if they got caught? What if Officer Daniels wasn't the only one suspicious? What if their secret was exposed? "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," Jennifer admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "But I can't just let go. Not after everything." Lisa's expression softened, and she reached out, her hand resting lightly on Jennifer's arm. "I know," she said quietly, "but we have to be careful. We can't keep playing this game if we're not both in it." Jennifer stared at Lisa, searching her face for some sign that this wasn't the end. But all she saw was the same uncertainty she felt within herself. A long silence stretched between them, neither of them speaking, both of them lost in their thoughts. The sound of the prison yard, the distant shouts of inmates, seemed to fade into the background as Jennifer tried to process everything that was happening. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice small. Lisa looked at her, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "We keep going, but we do it smarter. We can't afford to slip up again, and we need to stay under the radar. No more close calls." Jennifer nodded slowly, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. They weren't giving up. They were just recalibrating, adjusting to the new reality of their dangerous game. But the doubt lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of Jennifer's mind. Could they really keep this up? Could they continue to walk this fine line without tipping over into disaster? Days turned into weeks, and the delicate balance Jennifer and Lisa had tried to maintain slowly unraveled. The pressure of living with a secret, especially one that felt as dangerous as the one they were harboring, took its toll. Jennifer's once confident demeanor became more fragile, and she found herself constantly on edge. Every sound, every glance from a fellow officer made her skin crawl. She couldn't tell if it was the growing paranoia or the inevitable fallout of their actions that haunted her. Lisa, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos. She had always been the more calculating of the two, able to compartmentalize her emotions and keep her focus. But even she was beginning to show signs of wear. The air between them had shifted, the connection they shared growing more intense with each passing day. The stolen moments, the quiet conversations in hidden corners had become both a comfort and a constant reminder of the danger they were living in. One afternoon, Jennifer found herself in the prison yard, pacing back and forth, trying to clear her head. The familiar weight of the walls surrounding her felt even heavier today, as if they were closing in on her, suffocating her with their confinement. Her mind raced, and she couldn't stop replaying the events that had brought them here, how everything had started so innocently, with a simple glance, a touch, and now the stakes were higher than ever. Lisa had been distant lately, more preoccupied with her own thoughts, and Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. She glanced over at Lisa, who was talking to a fellow inmate in the corner of the yard, her expression unreadable. It was as if Lisa had already moved on, her thoughts elsewhere, her focus elsewhere. Jennifer approached cautiously, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her chest. Lisa looked up as Jennifer approached, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," Jennifer said, her voice hesitant. "What's going on with you? You've been off?" Lisa shrugged, her arms crossed over her chest. "I've just been thinking, Jennifer, about everything." Jennifer's heart sank at the words. "What do you mean?" Lisa hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice lower than usual. "I've been thinking about how much longer we can keep this up. The closer we get to the edge, the more dangerous it becomes. We're both walking a tightrope, and I'm starting to wonder if it's worth it." Jennifer felt her stomach drop at Lisa's words. She had known, deep down, that this moment was coming, the moment when one of them would start questioning everything. "I don't want to back down," Jennifer said, her voice shaking slightly. "I can't just pretend this never happened. I can't pretend you don't mean something to me." Lisa's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of something in her expression, but it was quickly replaced by a coldness that sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. "I know, Jennifer," Lisa said softly. "I know. But the risks are too high. We can't keep playing this game and expect to come out unscathed. Someone's going to catch on, and when they do, it's going to be too late." Jennifer swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. She had known the consequences of their actions, but hearing Lisa's words made them feel more real, more imminent. "What do we do then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's gaze drifted to the ground for a moment, her fingers tapping nervously on the chain-link fence separating the yard from the rest of the facility. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I do know this. If we keep going down this road, we won't make it out the other side, not without something breaking. Either we walk away now, or we risk losing everything." The weight of her words hit Jennifer like a physical blow. She had never imagined that Lisa, strong, unshakable Lisa, would be the one to question everything. But here they were, at a crossroads, and Jennifer had to make a choice. "Do you want to walk away?" Jennifer asked, her voice small and vulnerable. Lisa didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up, her gaze intense. "I'm not sure," she said finally. "But I do know that whatever happens, we need to stop pretending like we're invincible. Because we're not." The silence between them stretched, and Jennifer felt the weight of the decision hanging over her. She had always been the impulsive one, the one who followed her heart without thinking of the consequences. But now, with the reality of their situation settling in, she wondered if she had been fooling herself. Had the risks always been too great? Had she been too blinded by her feelings to see the bigger picture? Before she could respond, the loud clanging of the prison gates interrupted their conversation, and both women turned toward the sound, their hearts racing. A guard stood at the entrance of the yard, calling for the inmates to return to their cells. Lisa shot Jennifer a quick, unreadable look before turning to walk back toward the entrance. Jennifer stood frozen for a moment, her mind spinning. She wasn't ready to give up, but a part of her knew that Lisa was right. They were playing a dangerous game, one that could cost them everything, but could she walk away now? The next few days felt like a slow descent into uncertainty. Every glance exchanged between Jennifer and Lisa seemed laced with unspoken words, the air between them charged with a tension that neither could deny. The prison walls, once a backdrop to their secret moments, now felt like a trap, closing in on them, suffocating them with their own lies. Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about the conversation they'd had in the yard. Lisa's words had been a wake-up call, a reminder that the life they were leading, fraught with secrets and dangerous games, was unsustainable. But Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that walking away now would mean giving up on something she couldn't quite define. She had invested so much in their connection, in the stolen moments, the quiet promises made in the shadows. Was she ready to let all of that go? The days passed in a blur, each one blending into the next. Jennifer tried to keep her focus on her duties, but every task felt like it was being carried out on autopilot. Her thoughts always drifting back to Lisa. What did she really want? Did Lisa still care? Or was she just looking for an escape? Lisa, for her part, seemed distant, as if she had already made her decision. She was cold and withdrawn, keeping to herself more often, her eyes hollow and distant. Jennifer knew that Lisa had always been more guarded than she was, but this felt different. It wasn't just her usual aloofness. It was as if she had shut herself off completely, creating a barrier between them that Jennifer couldn't break through. One evening, as they sat across from each other in the break room, the silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Jennifer tried to focus on the papers in front of her, but her gaze kept flicking up to Lisa, who sat, her head bowed, scribbling something in her notebook. Finally, unable to stand the silence any longer, Jennifer spoke. "Lisa, we need to talk about everything." Lisa's pen stopped moving, but she didn't look up. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about," she said quietly. Jennifer's heart clenched at the words, and she leaned forward, her voice tinged with desperation. "We can't just keep pretending this isn't happening. We can't keep living like this. You're pulling away, and I don't understand why." Lisa's eyes finally met hers, and there was a hardness in them that Jennifer had never seen before. "Because I can't do this anymore, Jennifer. I've been thinking about it for days, and I've made up my mind. I'm done." The words hit Jennifer like a punch to the gut. She had known, deep down, that this was coming, but hearing it aloud felt like a cruel betrayal. "Done?" Jennifer echoed, her voice breaking. "You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through?" Lisa's expression softened for a brief moment, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I'm not walking away from you, Jennifer. I'm walking away from everything else. From the lies, from the secrecy, from the mess we've created. This isn't what I wanted. It's not what I thought it would be." Jennifer swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. "So what? We just forget about everything? Forget about us?" Lisa's face contorted with frustration, and she stood up, pacing the room. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice strained, "but we're in too deep. We can't keep playing with fire and not expect to get burned. I'm trying to protect myself, Jennifer. I'm trying to protect us." The words stung, but Jennifer couldn't deny the truth in them. They had both been living on the edge for so long, and now the consequences were catching up with them. "And what about me?" Jennifer asked, her voice small, almost pleading. "What do I do now?" Lisa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the window, staring out at the bleak prison yard beyond. When she spoke again, her voice was low and filled with regret. "I don't know, Jennifer. I don't know what you do. But I do know that whatever happens, we can't keep going like this." Jennifer stood up, her knees weak, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to reach out, to make Lisa understand, but the distance between them felt insurmountable. "You're leaving," Jennifer whispered, as if the realization were just beginning to sink in. Lisa nodded, her back still turned. "I have to. For both of us." The silence between them was deafening, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jennifer didn't know what to say. She had always been the one to chase after what she wanted, but now, with Lisa slipping further and further away, she realized that sometimes, no matter how much you fight, some things are just too broken to fix. Lisa left the room without another word, and Jennifer stood there, frozen in place, the weight of her words pressing down on her. The decision had been made. Lisa had chosen to walk away, and Jennifer was left standing in the aftermath, unsure of where to go from here. As the days passed, Jennifer tried to move on, but it was harder than she expected. The prison walls no longer felt like a familiar safety net. Instead, they seemed like a cage, trapping her in a life she no longer recognized. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something precious, something she might never get back. But there was no turning back now. The damage had been done, and the consequences of their actions were irreversible. Jennifer was left to pick up the pieces of her life, unsure of where it would lead, but knowing one thing for certain. She would never forget the moments she had shared with Lisa and the choices they had made that would haunt them both forever. Jennifer sat alone in her small, dimly lit cell, the silence suffocating. The days seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every night, as she lay in the cold, hard bed, her mind replayed the last conversation with Lisa. No matter how many times she tried to forget, the words echoed in her ears. "I'm walking away. For both of us." Her heart ached at the memory, but there was nothing she could do. Lisa had made her choice. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances. The prison walls felt more confining now, as if they were closing in on her with every passing day. The worst part was that Jennifer couldn't even hate Lisa. She understood. Lisa had been trying to protect them both, trying to escape a life that was spiraling out of control. They had both known from the start that this relationship was dangerous, but they had taken the risk anyway. And now, as the dust settled, they were left with the wreckage. Days turned into weeks, and Jennifer found herself sinking further into a state of numbness. She went through the motions of prison life, eating, working, and attending mandatory therapy sessions. But her heart wasn't in it anymore. The part of her that had once been full of passion and fight had withered away, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Then one day, as Jennifer was walking through the hallways of the prison, she was stopped by a guard. "You've got a visitor," the guard said, his tone unfeeling. A visitor? Jennifer's stomach dropped. The only person who had ever visited her was her estranged sister, and she hadn't seen her in months. Could it be her? Her mind raced as she was escorted down the long, sterile corridors to the visitation room. When the door opened, she was greeted by the last person she had ever expected to see, Lisa. Lisa stood there, looking almost out of place in the harsh fluorescent light. Her once fiery eyes were now weary, but they still held a depth of emotion that made Jennifer's heart skip a beat. She looked older somehow, worn down by something only she could understand. "Lisa." Jennifer's voice trembled as she spoke her name. She didn't know what to feel, what to say. The confusion was too much. Lisa smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She took a step forward, and for a moment, Jennifer thought she might be dreaming. But the feel of the cold metal chair against her back brought her back to reality. "I needed to see you," Lisa said softly, sitting down across from her. Jennifer's heart raced. "Why now?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why after everything?" "After you left, I thought—" "I know," Lisa interrupted, her voice strained. "I know I hurt you, and I can't undo that. But I've been thinking about it all this time, and I realized something. I was wrong to leave you like that. I was wrong to push you away." Jennifer's breath hitched, and she felt a surge of hope that she quickly tried to suppress. Could it be possible? Could Lisa truly be back, or was this just another cruel twist of fate? "I didn't want to hurt you, Jennifer," Lisa continued, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I thought leaving was the best thing for both of us, but I've realized I was wrong. I can't just walk away from everything we shared, from everything I felt for you." Jennifer stared at her, her heart racing, her mind whirling. "You're telling me you want to try again?" she asked, her voice shaky. "After everything that's happened, you think we can just start over?" Lisa's eyes were filled with an almost painful sincerity. "I don't know if we can start over, but I do know that I can't live the rest of my life pretending that none of this mattered. I don't want to regret not giving us a chance." Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes as she searched Lisa's face. The years of pain, the heartache, and the longing all rushed to the surface. "But we've hurt each other so much. Is there really any way back from all of this?" Lisa reached across the table, her hand trembling as she placed it over Jennifer's. "I don't know," she admitted softly, "but I'm willing to try. For us." Jennifer closed her eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She knew that nothing would ever be the same again, that their relationship would never be as simple as it had once been. But she also knew that she couldn't just walk away from what they had. No matter how many mistakes they'd made, no matter how much pain they'd caused each other, there was something between them that couldn't be ignored. For the first time in a long time, Jennifer felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a guarantee that things would work out, but perhaps it was worth trying. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. "I don't know what the future holds," Jennifer said, her voice steady, "but I'm willing to take that first step with you. Even if we can't undo the past, we can still choose what happens next." Lisa nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Then let's take that step together." As the guards signaled the end of their visit, Jennifer felt a strange sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges they would face were still immense. But for the first time in months, Jennifer believed that perhaps they could rebuild something worth fighting for. With that, Lisa stood, squeezing Jennifer's hand one last time before turning to leave. The door closed behind her, but Jennifer didn't feel the same crushing loneliness she had before. She felt lighter. The journey was far from over, but at least now they were no longer walking it alone. The end